300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. I have to ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game. I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad to have you with me on a Wednesday morning. I have a great show for you coming up in about 10 to 15 minutes. My guest, we're going to break down the NBA playoffs. It's going to be a tremendous conversation with my friend Jonathan Rifkin. Make sure to stay tuned for that. But I have to start with right on cue with the NBA playoffs. I want to focus a little individually on one of the marquee games from last night, the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies ultimately won 111-109 thanks to a game-winning layup by Ja Morant to lead the Grizzlies to a 3-2 series lead in the best-of-7 first-round Western Conference matchup. So, first of all, by the way, Anthony Edwards, I love Anthony Edwards. I'm going to talk about him. But you can't go for that gamble. You can't go for the steal. It's the wrong gamble. It's the poor choice at that moment in the game. You have to stay in front of Morant. He tries to pick it off high side, and Morant's got a driving lane to the basket with 3.5 seconds left, makes an acrobatic finish, and they obviously win the game. It almost reminded me of the game-winning layup LeBron James made in 2013 against the Indiana Pacers in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals in 2013. Paul George was defending. They weren't quite ready to defend. Paul George kind of was attempting at a steal. LeBron made a quick catch and turned towards the basket, and he laid it up in with his left hand, and that was Game 1 of that series. But overall, this is an incredible series. This is how I figured it would go. And it's an incredible series because it features 2 of the youngest and brightest NBA stars. And normally you don't see that. Normally you don't see in the first round both the higher seed and the lower seeded teams, both youthful in their experience, in their maturity, in their personnel. You normally don't get that. So this is a true treat as a basketball fan to get this series, and it's playing out exactly how I expected it to play out. You got Ja Morant, who I absolutely love. He's a scintillating basketball player. You have Anthony Edwards, who's emerging before our very eyes. Karl Anthony Towns, of course, just hasn't gotten enough reps in the postseason, but when he's on, he's big time. I'm going to touch on him in a moment. But Ja Morant, this is the thing that I love about Ja Morant. Obviously, he dropped 30 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, a near triple-double. He had 18 points in the fourth quarter, which was a franchise playoff high. It's the most points scored in the fourth quarter by a Memphis Grizzly in their playoff history, just for starters. But what I absolutely love about Ja Morant is not just the moxie, not just the brashness that he plays with. I love the pace that he plays with, because he plays with such control, yet he maintains that same ferocity. He uses that filthy handle to create for himself, to drive to the basket, to open up lanes, to facilitate an extremely high level. And what's amazing to me is he maintains that same aggressive and attacking mentality as others that came before him, but he plays with a certain sense of control and a little bit more poise. I oftentimes call him the modern day Derrick Rose because he attacks the rim with the same conviction and the same aggressiveness and the same explosion, but he's got more than one gear. Derrick Rose typically had one gear. That's it. With Ja Morant, he can probe with ease. He is a tremendously fluid basketball player, just understands timing, understands pace, changing that up, changing speeds of direction. And I just love the way that he controls games when he's on. And we've been seeing that. We've been seeing that in a couple of these games down the stretch. And it's important to highlight those younger guys being able to demonstrate that skill because it's not a it's a rarity. It really is. However, this series also illuminates everything that's infuriating about this series, about two younger teams, about youthful inexperience, about poor shot selection, ill-timed mistakes, just boneheaded decision making. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they have continually shot themselves in the foot. No pun intended. They've shot themselves in the foot. They've also shot themselves out of games because of some of these poor decision makings down the stretch. Because the Minnesota Timberwolves committed 23 turnovers last night. That was the second most turnovers committed by the Timberwolves in their postseason history. And to me, when I watch Minnesota play, Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards are clearly the two best guys on the team. And it is absolutely vexing to me. And I was apoplectic to see for the second time in the series when they were up by double digits in the fourth quarter and Memphis was starting to surge back for the second time. We saw it in game 3 and now we saw it last night. That the guy that Minnesota is turning to create and to take big shots as trying to be the run stopper for the Timberwolves is Patrick Beverley. And I love Patrick Beverley. He is a pest defensively. He's just a gnat that you can't get out of your hair. And I love the leadership that he brings. I love the defensive tenacity that he plays with. But why in the hell is Patrick Beverley the guy taking shots down the stretch of games? You've got Karl Anthony Towns, who is rolling, 28 points for him. Now, he was making a lot of his threes. Personally, I'd like to see him operate a little bit closer to the basket. But regardless, he was rolling with 28. You've got Anthony Edwards, who is an emerging superstar. Now, right now, he's not assertive enough. He doesn't demand the basketball enough, which is something we see with younger basketball players like LaMelo Ball. He just doesn't demand the ball enough down the stretch. But the clutch shot-making ability, we saw that again on display last night. The clutch three in the corner with one that's tied at 109. I just don't understand why down the stretch of games, Chris Finch isn't putting the ball in Karl Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards' hands. Those two guys should touch the ball on every single possession down the stretch. Doesn't mean they have to shoot it every time, but it should be in their hands. And the fact that Patrick Beverley is the one running pick and roll with Cat down the stretch, and Beverley is the one making the decisions, and Beverley is trying to take on Ja Morant because he sees him as a porous defender, it just mind boggles me why Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards aren't the guys making those decisions. I just don't get it. I love the beef between Beverley and Ja. Beverley makes a shot. He gestures his hand down saying, "You're too small." Ja responds the same way. So neither one of those guys were going to back down from one another. But it just mind boggles me that Chris Finch, who I like, who I think's done a nice job, why he doesn't say, "Hey, Patrick, put the ball in the hands of Anthony Edwards and just get out the way." It's amazing to me. But with the T-Wolves, the problem is that they take just irrational shots at times, just really illogical shots, quick, They don't get into good offensive sets down the stretch often, and that's what you would expect to see with different younger teams. They coughed it up way too much. And D'Angelo Russell is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You really don't know which version of him you're going to get. He's averaging 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 7 assists for the series. 7 assists are good. He's shooting 31% from the floor for the series. And he has to be that X factor. He's got to be that difference maker. And they just didn't get enough production out of him down the stretch. But again, give credit to Memphis because the matter of fact, at the end of the day, they're up 3-2. But if you are a staunch NBA observer and you actually watch those games, really the Timberwolves should be leading this series, if not already have won this series. But their inexperience has allowed Memphis to come back. Memphis has demonstrated a lot more poise. They've got a lot more depth. And obviously I mentioned Ja. Desmond Bane is stroking it. He's a football rugby player playing basketball. There's no need to gloss over it. That guy should be wearing shoulder pads. And Dylan Brooks is not scared of anyone. He's playing with a lot of confidence. Obviously, I mentioned Bane. You got the Zamboni and Kyle Anderson, who I love, the UCLA guy. And I can go down the list. Jaren Jackson is kind of like a Bam Adebayo type. He can stretch the floor, an elite defensive player. If he just doesn't get into foul trouble, that's the problem with he and Cat. If both of those guys can avoid foul trouble, they can be extremely productive. Tyus Jones doesn't turn the ball over. And Memphis, again, they've executed a little bit better down the stretch of games. But just some poor decision-making, really by both sides, but especially by Minnesota is what's cost them in the series. And I predicted that this would be a dogfight. I didn't necessarily say that Memphis was going to lose, but when the series was tied, when they lost the first game, I was worried about Memphis because this is not a team you're just going to put down really quickly. And nothing so far has proven to disprove that. So I can't wait for the rest of the series. And again, it's refreshing to see two young superstars playing in the first round of the postseason. You don't really get to see it too much on both sides. So that's extremely pleasant to see. But I just found myself thinking for Minnesota, I love Patrick Beverley, but God, put the ball in Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns' game. Make the action between those two guys. I just don't. Hey, credit though to Memphis and Ja. Nice job by them. Okay, very quickly, just for a couple minutes, want to touch on one other topic, and then I'm going to bring on my guest, Jonathan Rifkind, in just a moment. 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes here. So want to just touch on a tennis topic real quick. It was just announced yesterday that Novak Djokovic, the world #1 tennis player, was cleared to play at the Wimbledon 2022 Grand Slam Tournament. The All England Club at Wimbledon, they are excusing basically every single player, and even unvaccinated players are allowed to play. Vaccinated or unvaccinated are all allowed to play at this year's Wimbledon tournament. And for Novak Djokovic, he is the 3-time reigning defending champ for Wimbledon, won in 2018, 2019, and 2021. Didn't play in 2020 at all because of COVID canceling the tournament altogether. And we obviously know that Djokovic wasn't permitted to play at the Australian Open. He wasn't fully immunized by that time. So we know that story. And he's looking to become the first player since Roger Federer won 5 consecutive Wimbledon tournaments from 2003 to 2007. Djokovic is looking to win 4 straight, which would, again, put him in position to potentially match Roger Federer's record that he set before. I've said this before as a tennis fan, and if you are a tennis fan, having Novak Djokovic play in the tournament is a major plus. He is a tremendous tennis talent, and as a tennis fan, again, I'm happy and glad to see that he will be a part of the 2022 Wimbledon tournament. The game is better when he's playing. He is, I've said this before, he's the most versatile tennis player I've ever seen. His ability to play different styles is incredible. He's the greatest return of server I've ever seen. his ability to transition from defense to offense on the tennis court is one of a kind. And how he maintains his pliability and his flexibility, it's incredible. And so, again, the game is better with him playing. But the fact of the matter is, because of his principle and his ego, he cost himself the chance at another Grand Slam title. That's the truth of the matter. Whatever side of the fence you're on doesn't matter. That's the reality of the situation. Nadal kicked open that door, and he won his 21st Grand Slam. So the big takeaway for me, seeing this title, seeing this notification, is you have to be extremely fortunate right now if you're Djokovic, because Wimbledon is accommodating you. Now, obviously, in this particular instance, they're not making one exemption for one player, but they're accommodating him. And who knows what the French Open is going to say. I don't know what position France is going to be taking with the tournament, but that's what I was thinking of, was Djokovic is very fortunate that he's being afforded this additional opportunity, because as much as he is an advocate of free speech, and not just free speech, but just his freedom, his right to choose, I'm sure, and he values that, and that outweighs his chase for history, which might be true. It might be true, but all of this was his own doing. Not getting a chance to play at the Australian Open. He's fortunate now he gets to play here. And again, I'm happy to see him play, but the reality is he should be waking up today feeling very fortunate and blessed that he can play. That's all I'll say on that for now. Okay. Now I'm going to be bringing on my guest today. His title continues to change every couple of months. He is doing great stuff. He does radio play-by-play for the San Diego State Aztecs baseball. He's a television broadcaster for Cal State Fullerton, calling multiple sports for them. Now he's a co-host and a producer of the Darren Smith Show on iHeartRadio, San Diego. It's my pleasure to bring on to the show Jonathan Rifkin. Jonathan, good morning. How are you?
I'm good, Jonah. That was a really thrilling way for me to wake up to catch the end of your Minnesota take and a little bit on Djokovic here.
Yes, it is. Well, I know that that's why you woke up this morning, was to hear the take.
Yeah, this is just a consolation.
So let me ask you, because I know you're going to enjoy this. This is going to be a big NBA playoffs conversation. He's a big Boston Celtics fan. If you haven't already guessed that from him, if you don't know him, he's a huge Boston.
What around me is giving that away?
Unfortunately, nothing right now based on what's in your room would suggest that. But okay, let's start with the Celtics and the Nets. So yes, the series is over. Celtics swept the Brooklyn Nets. But I think it's funny. Everyone's approaching it from the perspective of the Brooklyn Nets got swept. And that's true, they did. But if you look at all four games, the Brooklyn Nets lost by a combined 18 points in all four games. And I don't say that to diminish what the Celtics did, because we're going to talk extensively about the incredible defense that they displayed in the series. But if I'm the Brooklyn Nets, despite all the dysfunction, despite all the lack of cohesion and all the off the court and on the court, really, turmoil that they've had to endure throughout the entire season, if I'm the Brooklyn Nets, had they just gotten a couple C+ performances from Kevin Durant, this series could be completely shifted. And especially in game one, I keep thinking back to, man, just imagine what the series would be like if Jason Tatum doesn't hit that game-winning layup. What we're thinking about this series, the pressure being shifted, the mindsets are changing. To me, it's just amazing how quickly the narrative can change and how we can look at a series and just kind of hypothesize about what might happen, despite the fact that the margin was so close. What were your takeaways kind of from that series?
The Nets could lack a ton of depth. The whole Tatum emerging over KD thing, I think, is an important point to start on here, because there's a lot of recency bias going on. And if you look at the longevity, obviously, of Kevin Durant's career, did Tatum outplay Kevin Durant for 3 of the 4 games? Yes. Is he better than Kevin Durant, and should he be placed higher on the NBA hierarchy? Absolutely not. And this series doesn't prove that Tatum is better than Kevin Durant. What this proves is that Tatum is capable of leading a team over a team with better adversaries, right? Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are more talented than any single player, or any duo more talented than Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the Celtics. But the Celtics as a team, the way that Jason Tatum was able to really facilitate, that was the biggest asset for the Celtics. That really stood out to me, was the step that he took to learn how to facilitate, to make better decisions. He realizes he draws a lot of offensive attention, so there's going to be guys open around him. We saw Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard with a ton of open shots. So offensively, I think for the Celtics, yes, it's cool to see Tatum score, but the biggest takeaway for me was his ability to facilitate and open up the game and spread the floor with action. Defensively, that's obviously the bread and butter of the series. You said 18 points over 4 games. That's the third fewest points in a sweep in NBA playoff history. The third game with the fewest points ever. So, the Nets were right in it. They played well in spite or despite Kevin Durant's performance the first 3 games and Kyrie Irving's performance the last 3 games, because he played pretty well the first game, but that was about it. I don't know how excited they would have been to have to go back to Boston for a game 5. And I think that might have, I'm not saying that they blew up this game and they sabotaged themselves, but I don't, like, Kyrie Irving is smiling after the end of the game. And I think he's smiling because at least he doesn't have to go back to Boston to deal with the Boston fans. It would have been a whole different environment. So, look, the reason the narrative changed, Jonah, is because everybody was talking about how this was going to be a dogfight, and how the Nets, and there were a lot of national media that were saying the Nets were going to come out on top. So before the series started, the narrative was the Nets have the better talent and are going to win this series. So the narrative changes because there was an improper narrative perceived prior to the series being started. If the series was the Celtics have a much better defense and they're going to frustrate Kevin Durant into 19 field goals and 17 turnovers in the first 3 games, then the narrative wouldn't have shifted, right? So I think that the perception of how this series was going to go is what allowed all of this intrigue and surprise to come out at the end of it. So at the end of the day, Celtics showed depth, they showed poise, and they showed defense, and that's what you need to win an NBA championship.
And it's interesting, the point about KD, because to me, this was the first time watching Kevin Durant, at least for an entire series, not just 1 or 2 games, where he just looked frazzled. And it wasn't just frazzled and frightened to shoot, just to dribble the basketball. I mean, just to execute a simple crossover. It was like I was watching Paranormal Activity and they start to play the violin when you creep open the door and you're like, what's going to happen here? Like, just a simple crossover. I'm looking at KD like, dude, you are an all-time Pantheon great. And they got in his head, and they absolutely were just kind of transfixed on showing multiple bodies on him. And I really think it got to him. And it made me think about some of the best defensive players to have ever attempted to guard Durant. And to me, I was thinking about guys like Ron Artest, guys like Tony Allen and PJ Tucker, even Rajah Bell, though Durant was a little younger when Bell was kind of at his prime defensively. But the difference is all those other guys were 6'7" or under. And you have so much more length with the Celtics team that the smallest guy really guarding Durant would be Smart at 6'5", 6'6", and then Brown and Tatum are 6'9" and 6'8". And so that's a lot more depth. Obviously, the majority of the time he wasn't defended individually. You had help defenders all the time. That's why they were trying to funnel him towards the middle. But were you at all kind of surprised by how successful the defensive scheme was on him the whole series?
Yeah, because he's proven that he could beat almost any defense. Now, did it help? I don't want to be one of those people, but there is something to be said about having Russell Westbrook and James Harden on your team, or having Steph and Clay and Draymond on your team. And now you have Kyrie Irving, who has been a psychological detriment to your team, who hasn't been playing well comparatively to how he typically plays. And then a bunch of guys who are mostly role players. And I think that makes it really, really hard, because Kevin Durant hasn't proven that he can take on a defense like this all by himself. And honestly, there are two NBA players of all time that have probably been able to do it: Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and that's probably the end of the list for the position and the style that Kevin Durant plays. I'm sure Kareem and and Bill there were times when Kobe was unstoppable, but on a consistent basis, what comes to my mind are the two greatest players of all time, and that's about it. When in terms of actually being productive against defenses, suffocating defenses like this without any support around them.
And were you surprised though by his unwillingness to take shots? Again, it's different when, because I get your point. It's one thing to be inefficient, to be ineffective. It's another thing to just simply want to shy away from taking shots. And at least for the first 3 games, for whatever reason, he just didn't seem like he wanted to take the shots down the stretch. Game 4, jack them all up, die with the ship. Okay. Yes, he wasn't as efficient, whatever. He got up 31 shots. But as you mentioned, the 19 field goals in 13 games in the first 3 games, to me, that's more a mindset thing as far as an inability to handle a defense. But maybe you saw it differently.
No, I agree with you. I think there was anticipatory anxiety because the first game sort of set the precedent with how the defense was going to play him. And I think at that point, when you had 6 turnovers the first game, for somebody who doesn't turn over the ball in bunches like that, I think that when that happens and you get out of your comfort zone a little bit, there's a psychological effect that turns into anticipatory anxiety. Every time you get the ball, now you're wondering, who's going to be coming at me? Where are they going to be cutting me off? Who's going to be getting the passing lanes, this, that, and the other? And he even said after game 3, I'm in my head. And that's not typical for Kevin Durant. But again, when do we get in our head? When we're out of our comfort zone? The Celtics took him out of his comfort zone, and he wasn't sure what to do. And in that last game, he went back to being Kevin Durant. It wasn't enough, but that's my point, where he has often needed to rely on other players to help him out a little bit. And he didn't have that in that game 4, even when he looked like Kevin Durant. So, no, I agree with you. I think that I was a little bit surprised that he became unwilling to shoot the ball as much as we've seen him. But it also makes sense because he was facing a defensive level that I don't know if he's ever seen before in the postseason.
And final kind of question with KD, because obviously I was thinking about his legacy, and Charles Barkley was thrown out, the boat topics. And to be fair to Kevin Durant, listen, he is an all-time great player, and I don't want to diminish him at all or claim that he was simply riding shotgun. There are times when he was taking the wheel. But there is also some truth to those comments by Charles Barkley. As you mentioned, he hasn't necessarily proven he can lead a team to a championship as the clear number 1. With Golden State, he won those 2 finals MVPs, and that title was kind of just conferred onto him, but perhaps falsely. And I think that, we can't quite look at KD the same way as perhaps, as you mentioned more recently, a guy like LeBron, who reached 8 consecutive NBA finals, who basically was inflappable in the postseason as far as just managing to overcome any and all obstacles during that stretch to get his team to the finals and give themselves a chance. That's how I kind of look at KD right now. Again, he's an all-time great player. And I hated to admit that, because I really do like KD. I think he is one of those genuine, earnest guys that just loves to go out and hoop. But where does he kind of stand in your eyes right now after this postseason?
How much can you really fault him, right? The beginning of the year, he thought he was going to have Kyrie Irving and James Harden, and he didn't have Kyrie Irving, and James Harden was James Harden, right? He came into the season out of shape. He came into the season sluggish. He came into the season as if he didn't want to be there at all. And there were moments where, he looked all right, but he hasn't, and he still hasn't, even on the Sixers, looked like, the Houston Rockets, James Harden, or even to an extent, the James Harden from the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the James Harden that we expect, right? And that's been a big surprise. So I think that surprised Kevin Durant too. And then he expected to have Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving didn't want to get vaccinated. Kyrie Irving couldn't play home games or away games for a while. And then back in, midway through the season or just a little bit after, he's finally able to start playing. But all of these different things have an effect on the team chemistry. And Kevin Durant is part of that team chemistry. So I try to keep this in perspective. And then they trade James Harden for Seth Curry and Ben Simmons. And you have the whole Ben Simmons saga, right? Is Ben Simmons going to make his return when they go to fill in the regular season? Maybe. Well, that doesn't happen. Is Ben Simmons going to, wow, it just got really dark in here. Anyways,
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, Johnny just took off the lights there.
Yeah, Katie is casting a shadow over me right now. No, and Ben Simmons going to come back before the postseason starts? Maybe. Well, that didn't happen. Is Ben Simmons going to come back in at any point during round 1 of the series? Well, he's going to come back game 4. That didn't happen either. So to have to be constantly told that you're expecting something and it never comes after all the other things that you've had to deal with in terms of teammates and team chemistry, it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. And that's a lot for one person, any person to manage, right? I mean, look at the Lakers and LeBron this year. Obviously, LeBron is well past his peak, but he still showed signs of he carried that team. And he needed way more help than he got, and they missed the postseason, right? For Kevin Durant to be able to take this team, even though the Eastern Conference is weaker, still to a 7th seed, it's pretty impressive with what they've gone through. So, look, at the end of the day, he's one of the best scorers in the game ever, obviously. He's still top 5 player in the NBA in my mind. He was just dealt a really tough situation, and that's partially his fault because he wanted to play with Kyrie and James Harden. And this is the territory that comes when you play with Kyrie and James Harden.
So you mentioned James Harden, and this is a little bit of a lengthy kind of question and also just a little soliloquy on my end. But it's funny because now that KD and Kyrie are out, I think naturally everyone's attention is shifting to James Harden. Now we're more closely examining James Harden. We're taking a closer look at him. And every time I've watched him this postseason, I keep growing more frustrated with him. I keep growing more irritated. And I finally decided to ask myself, okay, why am I so frustrated watching this guy? Why does 15 points, 12 assists just piss me off? And I realized that for me, I think part of the reason why I've been so frustrated watching James Harden is not for the fact that he's not able to blow by guys anymore. It's not the fact that it's James Harden and I don't feel like he's taking enough shots. He's not shooting as efficiently. I think what I'm starting to realize is the amount of money that these guys are getting in the NBA. I think that's what is ultimately sparking these expectations to soar. And I feel like my expectations of James Harden are soaring, not just because of the name on the jersey, but because of the money that he's being paid and the expectations that come with someone who's making that type of money. Because the two guys that have had the most conflict around them this year, Russell Westbrook and I would say Kyrie Irving, but really, James Harden in this particular point, who have been kind of the most vexing and irritating guys to watch this year. I was trying to pinpoint why I was so upset. And I feel like if you look at those two guys, we had a kind of conversation about this before, how, okay, if these guys were getting paid $10 million as opposed to $47 and $50 million, would we be, as NBA fans, quite as disappointed and upset by their performances, or in Russ's case, feel like he is that much more detrimental to his team if he wasn't getting paid as much? So for me, I almost feel like part of the angst and the frustrations are a little bit misplaced and a little mistargeted, because yes, we are frustrated with the player, but I think we're frustrated with the money and the expectations that come with the money for that said player. Is that how that's how it's kind of been starting to land for me? Do you share any of that feeling at all, or do you have different reasons for being perhaps frustrated with those guys?
When you're paying tens of millions of dollars for somebody with a certain expectation, you're expecting to get the worth of and the value of which that contract is supposed to bring, and you're just not getting that with James Harden. Now, I heard a conspiracy from Stephen A yesterday. I don't think that I don't know. I don't want to believe it, so I'm not going to believe it because it would be really unfortunate if it was true. But he brought up in the middle of his post-game talk with about the 76ers yesterday on Inside that James Harden wants Mike D'Antoni to be the coach. And so it's a lot easier for there to be a coaching change if he doesn't play well and they don't win. Because Daryl Morey also wants Mike D'Antoni. So look, I don't that could be a factor in why he's not playing.
I did hear
well.
that too. Yeah,
I don't want to believe it, so I'm not going to. Now, if Doc Rivers gets fired and Mike D'Antoni ends up becoming the coach of this team after the season, I'll reevaluate my feelings on that comment. But even Kendrick Perkins and JJ Redick and that whole inside group was like, cannot believe that he said that because that was not prepped prior in their production meeting. Anyways, to your point, you're not getting the value of what you're paying James Harden. That should frustrate people. That's frustrating you. It should frustrate way more people. But it's James Harden, right? I think that he's sort of become the boy who cried wolf. We keep expecting him because he's James Harden. We know he has the skill. We keep expecting him to have, 30, 10 and 8 or 30, 10 and 10 or 40 and 10 or 40 and 12. Like this guy has proved, this guy went on a 40-point streak in Houston. I don't know if he has that in him anymore. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know if it's a team thing. But I think that we have to taper our expectations and then, when that contract's up, maybe pay him a little bit less because his reputation just isn't presently.
If they could do that, if they could sign him to even, I don't know, a 4-year, $100 million deal, like $25 million a year, I think people would again I think the frustrations would dissipate a little bit.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. Here's the problem. Like the Sixers might do that. But then comes, Cleveland, or then comes Orlando, like a team with all the money, a small market team with all the money in the world. Exactly, and he'll go lose, 60 games, 50, 60 games to go make $35 million a year, $40 million a year, no problem. He already did it in Houston. He drove Russell Westbrook out. Russell Westbrook, who's a detriment to his own team that drives other players out. He drove Chris Paul out. Nobody drives Chris Paul out. Chris Paul is supposed to be the best teammate in the NBA, and he drove him out. So, and then he pisses off Kevin Durant, and I bet you Kyrie was a big reason why Kyrie Irving was okay not playing.
True, that's true.
So
that's true.
I just don't think that these guys want to. Because if you think about Oklahoma City days, right? Like he was sort of the glue coming off the bench with those two. And then he plays with Westbrook again, and Westbrook hates playing with him. And then he goes and plays with KD again, and KD hates playing with him. The difference between now and then is that James Harden has had a taste of what it's like to be the leader of a team and to play his own way. And that's not conducive to winning basketball. And those guys.
It so happens that the second time he played with KD, I don't know if KD hated playing with him. I just think there was mutual. They didn't see eye to eye because Harden was frustrated that Kyrie couldn't play. With Westbrook, yeah, he was probably like, dude, why are you jacking up all these threes? And
these are my threes to jack up, not yours.
Right. So, okay. So let me ask you about Minnesota and Memphis. Sure. I know you heard the very end of my take here. I love both of these teams, but I still and Ja's game-winning layup was sensational. Again, he is a scintillating basketball player. He's absolutely sensational. But I'm watching Minnesota and I'm like, damn it, guys. Like, why is Patrick Beverley running pick and roll with Cat at the end? Like right when Memphis is starting to surge. Obviously, in the last 2 minutes, sure, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, they were taking some of the shots, but that wasn't the key part of the fourth quarter. This was Patrick Beverley trying to create, and I'm thinking, Chris Finch, what are you doing? Put the ball in Anthony Edwards' hands or Karl Anthony Towns' hands and let them at least create something. They don't have to take the shot, but they should be touching the ball down the stretch. And Minnesota just makes so many turnovers. I mean, so many boneheaded, irrational decisions. And I love the team, but it's almost like they don't deserve to win because of all the turnovers and just kind of stupid decisions that they're making down the stretch. What do you take when you watch these games? Do you give more credit to Memphis? Because there's an argument to be made for both sides. Do you give more credit to Memphis, or are you also almost stunned at the way that Minnesota has sometimes collapsed down the stretch of some of these games?
Well, I mean, you give up in two different games, you give up over 20-point leads. In one game, you give up two 20-point leads. And the last night, you're up by 14 with 9:34 to play in the game. So I think that I don't know if it's an argument to be made for both. I think you have to acknowledge both sides. Like the Memphis Grizzlies' ability to sustain these games and finish them out is incredible, especially for a team that's averaging 23.9 years of age. Like they're the second youngest team behind Oklahoma City. They have the lowest postseason experience of any team in the playoffs, and they're learning real quick what it's like to play playoff basketball. But the problem is this, like, if they go on and they win this series, playing the Warriors is going to be very different than playing the Timberwolves, because the Timberwolves have no idea. Like, they're also young, 25 years old average age on that team, but they're more seasons, and you would expect them to make better decisions, especially down the stretch, and to protect leads. The one thing I will say is there was a media timeout, and they have the audio tracks last night of Chris Finch. And one of the things that Chris Finch said in the audio tracks in this timeout was, and this was midway through the fourth when they were playing hero ball again, and he said, we can't be playing hero ball. Everybody's trying to do it themselves. You need to let the ball dictate the game. And so I think in a way that's his approach. His approach isn't, Cat is our best player, our best scorer, our oldest and most, D'Lo's probably a little bit more veteran, but D'Lo, Cat, Ant, like his mindset isn't that these guys could all go in one-on-one situations and take over a game. His mindset is, we need to keep running our motion offense, and we're going to get the best possible shot. The problem is that their motion offense runs through Pat Bev, and we saw what happened, right? And the other thing about Pat Bev is, as much energy as he brings and as much fun as he is to watch, he scored 9 points. And he turned over the ball 6 times. This guy,
and mind you, people, after the play-in game for Pat Bev, people thought, okay, let's go to the box score. Pat Bev must have dropped over 20 points. He had 12 points. He had 12 points in the game.
Right. He's not giving you, 20, and he's not giving you triple doubles like Ja Morant is. So it's great. It's great that he has all this hype, but that's kind of all he's had is all this hype. And when they're playing on the road, you're not getting, and the crowd isn't responding to Pat Bev in a way that's going to support the team the way that they are in Minnesota. It almost doesn't really do that much, especially when Ja Morant's coming down the other side of the floor and doing things that are far more spectacular than you making a little floater over him from 8 feet out on the, inside the paint. So I think that the Timberwolves were in over their head. I think that their talent peaked at the most unfortunate times during the game, and they collapsed. And I think part of that is coaching. I think the part of that is just the way that their style of basketball is. Cat isn't a closer. Ant Edwards is young. I think Ant Edwards will eventually be one of the best closers in the league. He's just, he's in his second year. And then D'Lo is D'Lo. D'Lo takes a lot of really bad shots. He makes some crazy shots, and he misses some easy shots. So I just don't think that team is built to win, and I don't think they're built to win down the stretch. And Memphis, like you said, before I came on, they have the depth. I think they're more talented from top to bottom overall, from a team and a unit standpoint, and that showed when they come back from 2 20-point deficits into a 14-point deficit.
Yeah, no, they demonstrate a lot more poise, and I'm not putting this on Ant. I almost just feel badly for Ant.
Right.
He
hit that three. I mean, that corner three.
Yeah,
was
and again,
unbelievable.
In the final 2 minutes, I wasn't sitting there saying, okay, I think all of their offensive sets are awful, but it doesn't, to me, it just doesn't come down just to those 2 minutes. It's okay when you're up by 11, and then from the 8-minute mark to the 4-minute mark, your run stopper is Patrick Beverley shooting floaters. To me, that's not conducive to winning. But okay, final question. Let's talk about Golden State for a minute, because you had mentioned them, potentially previewed in the next round, and we know that the long-term solution isn't Steph coming off the bench. We know that cannot be the long-term solution here. So the question is, do they start all three? Do they bring Poole back off the bench? Can you even do that to Poole at this point in the way that he's playing? I mean, would that wreck his confidence if he came off the bench? I personally feel like he's got the mental makeup and the mental fortitude where at this point in his career, I really don't think it would. I think he sees the sacrifice that Steph's made for him. I think he would be more than willing to kind of return the crown to Steph, because I don't think you can do it to Clay, what he's meant to the organization, what he represents. To have Clay come off the bench is just acknowledging even if it is the prudent basketball decision, the pragmatic thing to do, hey, you're coming off 2 years of injuries. Can you come off the bench? I don't think they would do that to him. So what would you do if you're Steve Kerr and the Warriors and that's it in the situation between
Yeah,
Steph
I would
and
have Jordan Poole come off the bench. Look, I think that the productivity that he brings, like, look what Steph's doing off the bench, right? If Jordan Poole gives you 60, 70% of that, which he will, in productivity off the bench, then you're still going to go on and win those games, and it's still going to be a great game, right? Like, Steph is going to get you 35 off the bench. Jordan Poole is going to get you 24 or 23 or 20 or 25, 26 maybe. I don't know. But look, at the end of the day, that's you hit the point right on the nose right there with the people that he's surrounded with, right? Like, Steph has always been described as the most selfless superstar. He'll do anything that he can to help the team when he's never about himself. And that's why it's so easy for him to make the adjustment to come off the bench and to be around Draymond, who's been coaching him, and to be around Clay, who's this very stoic, very well thought out, level-headed person. I think that having the stars around him having the personality characteristics that they have makes it a lot easier for Jordan, right? If he's around Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, he's going to have a much different influence than being around Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson. And because those are his influences, I don't think it'll be a problem for him. If he should be coming off the bench, and if that is the decision made by Steve Kerr, I don't think it'll be a problem because he knows his value. He knows where he fits into this team. And there's still going to be lineups out there for 15 minutes of the game, 18 minutes of the game, where he's going to be out there with Clay and Steph and Draymond, and he knows that. And so I don't think that there's going to be much of a sacrifice from an actual play standpoint. Then you're not going to be playing the first 4 minutes or 5 minutes of the game because we need that production from Steph. I just don't think it's going to matter that much. So I think he'll be okay with it. I don't think it'll be much of an adjustment, and it just adds even more intrigue to this team.
True, and can't wait to see where Rudy Gobert's stamp card ends up getting.
I think that he's going to have to enjoy getting ready to play with Julius Randle.
That's what you said.
Yes.
Well, didn't you say you thought Donovan Mitchell? Oh, because you think
Donovan. Well, I think Donovan Mitchell's good because Donovan Mitchell has 4 years left on his card.
Yeah, I just don't know if the Knicks would do that. I really don't know if the Knicks would trade Julius Randle. I mean, I just think I think Rudy. I think Utah's going to try and expend as much energy as they can. They're going to exercise as many options to trade Rudy first than Donovan. I just don't.
I think they need to gut the team. I think that everybody needs to go. It's just keep Jordan Clarkson and get rid of everybody else. Poor Joe Ingles, man. I like that.
True, that's a shame. That's the other thing, Joe Ingles. But listen, a bunch of teams have been dealing with injuries. That's
exactly.
Unfortunate reality. Exactly. Jonathan Rifkin, thank you so much for joining me. You can catch him on iHeartRadio. What's the channel station in Fox?
Extra 1360 AM.
Extra 1360 for San Diego State Aztecs baseball, or Cal Fullerton on ESPN Plus, or the Darren Smith Show. What time is that?
12 to 3. 12 to 3.
So make sure to tune in for any and all of those events. Johnny, thank you so much for coming on, man. Always a fun time.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Malkin's Moments coming up, everybody. Get ready. Best segment in all of streaming talk show.
There you go. It's coming up next. Pleasure to have Johnny on. Okay, final topic, as he previewed my Malkin's Moments. So I've got a couple great Malkin's Moments for you. Have to stick with the NBA playoffs. Ja Morant, as I just touched on, led Memphis to a 111-109 victory over the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 5 of the NBA playoffs. Hits a game-winning layup to give the Grizzlies a 3-2 series advantage. And here's the interesting thing about Ja Morant. I mentioned how he scored 18 points in the fourth quarter, 9 of 10 from the free throw line. It's the most fourth quarter points by a Memphis Grizzly in postseason history. Not to mention, of those 18 points, here's the amazing thing. 16 of the 18 points were scored in the final 6 minutes. So you talk about a guy who can deliver in the clutch for you. That's Ja Morant. 16 of the 18 points came in the fourth quarter, not to mention earlier in Game 3 that the Grizzlies won when they came back from over 20 points down on the road at Minnesota. Ja Morant recorded a triple-double. He became the first Memphis Grizzly to record a triple-double in Memphis playoff history as well. He had 16, 10, and 10 in that game. Again, the Grizzlies outscored the Timberwolves in that game, 3 fourth quarter, 37-12. And he just continues to shatter records and continues to be an incredible, incredible ascending player. Shout out to him. Shout out to Klay Thompson, who moved into third place in the NBA playoffs all-time three-pointers made list. Right now, he is just sitting behind his teammates Steph Curry and LeBron James. He's hit 386 and counting threes so far. Obviously, he's just going to continue to rise up in the charts in that department. But big shout out to Klay Thompson. His recovery, where he's at right now, major shout out to him. And finally, so the Denver Nuggets beat the Golden State Warriors game 4 of their first round series to avoid getting swept. Now they are trailing 3-1, but they won 126-121. Here's the interesting thing. So Bones Highland is a rookie for the Denver Nuggets. He was drafted in the first round, 26 overall in last year's NBA draft out of VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, if you don't know what that acronym is. And so he dropped 15 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. He had a flurry of 3 3-pointers in the second quarter that extended the Nuggets' lead to 17. So those 3-pointers that he hit set history, because he is the first player over the last 25 postseasons with 3 30-footers in a single quarter. He hit 3 bombs from over 30 feet out. Just 2 other players have recorded 3 30-footers in a single playoff game over the last 25 years. Kevin Durant's done it once, and Damian Lillard has done it 2 times. So I'm not projecting Bones Highland is going to become one of those guys, but major shout out to him. That was a spectacular little flurry that he was on. And Denver always just seems to have these plug-in guys that are productive, always very versatile athletic wings that can produce time and time again, and he's proving to be one of those guys. Well, that'll do it for us. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_, JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thank you so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.